like to start also a live streaming on YouTube.
Okay.
Yes, we are live, and also I'm just going to record this. Okay, and now I'm just going to share my screen. So let's get started, if you don't mind. So from now, I'm very sorry for background noise. It's just my son. Okay. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to Baku Power BI, Excel, and Innovative Educators Meetup Group's first session in 2023. After greeting session, I'm just going to give a little bit information about our sponsor, so-called Enterprise DNA. And also, I will give a little bit information about my data summit that I'm planning to organize in this year, in September. And also for Azerbaijani auditorium audience, I will give information about the books that I am already translated and the books that are going to be published in March this year. And at the end of this session, we'll have just Q&A session. So if you have question, of course, you will be able to ask this question to Belinda Allen. So Enterprise DNA is a New Zealand educational platform where people will have an opportunity to learn Power BI and also other Power Platform products, including Power Apps, Power Automate, and also our language, Excel, and Python. So and one of the most important things is that two of our attendees in February randomly will be selected for 1 year full access for this, platform. So it must be very good information. And also, I would like to give you one information about the summit that is organized by Enterprise DNA. It's going to happen in February, so it will be lasting for 3 days, beginning from 21st February, and more experts from different parts of the world will be delivering speeches regarding Power Platform products. So I strongly recommend you to attend this event. It's a free of charge event, so I think it does worth to attend this event. And also, as for my data summit, as you may know, me and Faraz from Saudi Arabia, we together last year in September, organized so-called My Data Summit, which has lasted for 3 days, and 37 speakers from different parts of the world had joined, delivered speech. And from 72 countries, overall, 432 people participated in this so-called My Data Summit. And this year, I'm just going to organize this event in person, maybe in hybrid format in Azerbaijan, in its capital city, Baku, city of winds. I hope in next days I will be sharing the necessary information about this event. And regarding books, I have already translated a so-called Financial Modeling in Excel for Dummies book. The original language of this book is English, but it has been already translated into Azerbaijani. The author of this book is Daniela Stein-Fairhurst from Australia. This book, and also Master Your Data, which is about Power Query, which has been written a great men, Kempals, and also Miguel Escobar. And I'm translating in the process of translation of this book into Azerbaijani language, and it will be also published with Financial Modeling in Excel book in March 2023. So only roughly 2 months have been left, so it must be great news for Azerbaijan auditorium audience, and it will be available in all bookstores of Baku City. So today's speaker is Belinda Allen, who is MVP and MCT, and she's going to talk about report design for the Novice Power BI report consumer. And I hope in next minutes she will be telling about herself more. And as for our next speaker, she is coming from Canada. Her name is Ria Reklavek, and she will be talking about process automation. And this event is also live streaming on my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the other previous sessions, just type at Ilgar Zarbayev on YouTube. I mean, on any, say, web browser, youtube.com/at Ilgar Zarbayev. So you will find my YouTube channel, and you'll be able to watch all the recorded version. So that's all from my side. And also, just for your information, I will be sharing all the information, used files or presentation file and link also. So you can just click on this link and you can get all the, my social media, say, accounts. And thank you for joining for now. And I hope and strongly believe that I will be able to welcome you on February 24th. In next hour session. So now I would like to stop sharing here, and I would like to deliver stage to Belinda Allen. So Belinda, stage is yours. There you are.
Okay, let me go ahead and share. There you go. You should see my screen now.
Yes, I see your screen. I hope everybody sees your screen.
Okay, great. Before I start, there is the chat out there, and Ilgar, if you could help me, if someone puts something in there, just come on and interrupt me. And
exactly.
Yes, because I get excited sometimes and I keep on going and I miss people who have their hands raised or people in the chat, and I want you to stop and ask questions as you go along. So we're going to be talking. Okay, so we're going to be talking today about report design for the novice user. So a little bit about me. My name is Belinda Allen. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, in the United States. I've been a Microsoft partner. I need to update that because as of this month, it's 32 years. And I Microsoft MVP for the last 5 years for Power BI, for the first 6 years for Microsoft Dynamics GP, which is an ERP system. So many of my reports tend to evolve around financial data. It could be invoices and it could be manufacturing processes, but it's still around the financial system. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. I've been one for 12 years. And I've co-authored a couple books on business intelligence and Dynamics GP. And basically, I love learning and I love hobbies. So I just love learning any kind of new thing. So I'm open to all things. And I do tend to get excited, as I mentioned, and I know many of you are, even though you're bilingual, this English is not your first language. So if I start going too fast, and you want to slow me down, or you want me to explain something a little differently, please let me know. No problem with that whatsoever at all. Actually, I'm jealous of your being bilingual if you want to know the truth. So feel free to just jump in at any time. This session today is really something that kind of came to me after reading this book. And I read this book with a couple other people. There was a book club that MVP Chris Wagner did on this book, Effective Storytelling, and it was a very thought-provoking book for me. And so this is the guide of what it says. So it's a book I do recommend. There are 2 parts, the setting up for data for storytelling, and then the polish. So we're going to be focused today on the polish, removing noise, focusing attention, making things approachable, and instilling trust. And I'm going to give you my take on the book, and it was particularly the things that support my theories. So this is our agenda, those exact things. Who are the novice report consumers? That's a little bit additional, and then removing the noise, focusing attention, making your reports approachable, and instilling trust. And these things, the reason why this book was so important to me in this session formed in my head was because all of last year and all of this year, and who knows, maybe even 2024, my pet project is those novice report consumers. So when we build reports, how do we get people to use them and be excited about them? How do we make the report something that they'll want to use? And so that's my focus on almost all of my presentations last year, and probably almost all of my presentations this year will also be on that similar type of topic. Because so often I see people building really good report designers, building these reports that I think are beautiful, and I want to navigate or gravitate to them and use them, but they are something that could scare the user off. And I'm hearing consultants saying, I tried to show someone this report and they just said, no big deal. And so I want to help you make it easier for those users. So again, the bottom 4 areas of our session today are a direct correlation with that polished part of the book. So before we dig in, though, I do want to talk about in what way business intelligence has a lot of similarities to it, or a big similarity, at least, to a CRM system. And that is that nobody's going to force you to use it. If you provide someone with a really powerful report on sales with insights into customers, a salesperson doesn't have to use it, and they could still be successful. They could probably be no doubt they would be significantly more successful if they took the power of the insights that you're giving them, but there's nothing to force them to use it. So we need to make them want to use it. We need to make it easy for them as possible. Now, I had a customer one time in South Carolina. I lived in New York City for 18 years. So this goes back to before New York City, when we were implementing accounting software. And it was a nightclub. And in South Carolina at the time, nightclubs, when they sold alcoholic drinks, the alcohol had to be in small mini bottles. And the owner of the club said, I don't need an inventory report. I just look at the garbage can and I could tell my sales. And he was pretty consistent. But what came to my mind was, do you have any employees that are consistently stealing from you? So how do you know what you're doing? How do you know what you're selling? And so these are some really important things. I always thought that was kind of crazy. And to quote Einstein, fear of stupidity has always been the basis of most human actions. And in that case, I hate to pick on him, but and far be it for me to call anybody stupid, particularly to their face, but that was a really stupid comment. I look in the garbage can and see how many empty bottles are there, and that's how I know what our revenues are based off of. So we need to be more purposeful when we do things. And we need to also remember that C-level executives are not the only ones who need information. And so we need to build reports for them. And when I build reports, especially if I'm doing it generically, I think back at people I have worked with in the past. And I think to myself, how would John have acted or reacted to this report? How would Teresa have reacted to this report? And knowing them and seeing in hindsight what they've done, that usually helps me drive a lot of my decisions. So my idea for reports is basically data on training wheels. So separate reports or additional pages for things. And when I shared this concept and this whole idea of making these reports, even if you have to add more of them, separating things out, cleaning them up, and really making them super easy for someone to walk up and use with little to no training, and let their intuition take over. I shared it with my friend Melissa Coates. A lot of you probably know who she is. I call governance for Power BI the Melissa factor because she is the queen of it. But she said, oh, I see, that's a curated experience to go through the data in a logical way. And I said, yes, of course, that's what I meant. And not the data on training wheels. But she did validate my idea for a data on training wheels. Now, to continue validation for my data on training wheels, and even at the beginning of this session, Yilgar showed us a book that actually I made a note of it because I'm curious what they wrote about the data modeling for financial data. But there are so many dummy series books. Two of these that you see on the screen are ones I actually have. It is not the Chewing Food for Dummies, by the way, but I do have two of these on my shelf. We all want things that are easier to understand and easier to digest, so that is perfectly normal. And I'm going to even point out, this is one of the ones that I own. The other one is the Ukulele for Dummies. We have this book, JavaScript for Kids. We bought it to show our granddaughter and see if we could get her interested in JavaScript. And what we discovered is we enjoyed it as much as well. So it was a great way for me, particularly because I'm not a JavaScript person, or wasn't before this book. It's a way for me to understand it and have fun doing it. So this is validation for making the approach simple. There are people in the organization where you're still going to want to have these really big reports. But that being said, the really fancy ones that have all the wonderful things on them and buttons and bookmarks and all of that. But for the most part, those users that are starting out, they really need an approach to looking at data that is very logical to them and intuitive. So we want them to be able to do the whole self-service BI. We need to make it intuitive. So again, our goal is to have those report consumers embrace and use Power BI so they can understand the data and they can make data-driven decisions. And we need to think about this as we're writing up the report. So don't be afraid to make something look very simple, because some of your users will absolutely enjoy that. You might want to have a mix of pages or different reports entirely that are for different levels of users, for the newer users versus the more seasoned users. So, and I believe in data-driven decisions so much that now my legal title for signing documents is partner, but my title is influencer for data-driven decisions. So I try to help people make data-driven decisions. Now, speaking of data-driven decisions, so and I'm assuming this is worldwide, on the right, you could see a pack of cigarettes and it has a warning label on it. Our Surgeon General is like the medical department for the whole country. And they pointed out that smoking can cause lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and it could complicate pregnancy. It's right on that label. And it's been on there for a good long while. And what's so funny is that's the information, right? And so Jay-Z, who is a pop artist, a bit of a hip hop artist here. And I'm not necessarily a fan of hip hop, but I saw an interview with him and he made the comment that I just couldn't ignore. He's like, yeah, the warning on that pack of cigarettes is information. If you stop smoking because of that warning, that's knowledge. And I thought that is just brilliant. So if we're making informed decisions based off of the data we see, that's knowledge. And please forgive me if you hear a lot of noise. Hi, Kristen. If you hear a lot of noise, I have, they are working on my yard outside. So wouldn't you know, on a day where I'm meeting with all of you wonderful people. So Microsoft has something called the Center of Excellence. It's really geared more toward the the rest of the Power Platform than it is Power BI, but there's certainly some wonderful elements to it. And I've highlighted, well, there's a lot of really powerful things about evangelizing the data-driven culture, promoting the adoption of Power BI. And I'm not going to read all these to you. I'll send a PDF to Ilgar of my slide, and then you can, he could share it with anybody who's interested in it. But it's certainly something that you want to look at, and you're going to be able to get more and more information on how you can make your reports easier for people to use. It's just incredibly important. Now, let's begin as we start working. So this is the scenario that we're working with. I have a report that we're going to walk through as we make changes, but this is the scenario of what's happening. So you as the report designer are saying, what do you want on your report? And the manager is saying, I want sales and inventory quantities, just like my Excel reports. And we say, okay, we go to build them. Now, this is a very, very typical everyday scenario. So first of all, before we get in, the like my Excel reports, this one kind of concerns me unless they have visuals on their Excel report. We'll talk about, normally you're thinking what I'm thinking. If it's in Excel, they just have lots and lots of tables of data. And I really, I want to focus on that in a little bit. And we're going to pretend that we're going, oh, okay, I'm going to give you a Power BI report. So we're going to give this report, and I have the Power BI report with this page on it as well, and I'll include a PDF with this as well. And one of the things you notice is I have 9 visuals on this page. I have the line, that's one, the bar, the quantities, which is a matrix, the item sales, which is the matrix. I have the map. I have 2 slicers, they can't as well. I have the card, and then I have the sales title. So I have all this information on here, and I'm giving them exactly what they asked for, the quantity information and the sales by item, and I added a lot of stuff out here. Now, first of all, that's a very full page, and it has a lot on there. Oh, did I count that one too? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't get the title. That's actually 10 visuals on this very page. So that's really an unhelpful report. I know we're getting like really cool things in there, but we're really not evaluating, hey, what is it that you need? And so you want to be careful about how many visuals you put on a slicer to begin with, because the eye doesn't know quite where to go. And fortunately, I did something that I don't see enough people do, is I did put a little gray background on here so I could separate my visuals. A lot of times people will just leave the white background and then, or put something crazy bright and blinding, and it makes it a little hard to see, but until where one thing begins and the other ends. But this is this is really bad data. So just pretend that the data looks like it's something, it's just a Microsoft sample data set that I work with. So I'm curious, in the chat, let's have a little interaction there. On average, how many visuals do you think you put on a page? So I'm going to wait for a couple people to answer. So just put that in. How many visuals you tend to put, including that sales, because that was actually the 10th one. I see 10 plus 5, good. 4 to 5, 4, 5 or 6. And someone who's extremely honest, as many as I can cram in. I absolutely love that. That is so awesome. Yeah. So you want to keep in mind that you want to keep, especially for those new users, you want to keep the number of visuals down. A side note on why you'd want to keep visuals down: the more visuals you have on the page, the more it's going to negatively impact your performance. So you want to think about that as well. But from a novice user perspective, I think about 4 or 5 are a good number to have on a page. Now, we're going to approach this report using a little bit of the Microsoft Power BI adoption roadmap. I got this from their site. We're going to talk about data discovery, which is about finding the data. We're not going to get into that. Democratization is using the data, and data literacy is understanding the data. And actually, we're going to focus on data literacy here because we want them to be able to understand what it is that they're looking at. So when we're talking about data literacy, we're talking about giving them the ability to interpret what they're seeing on the graphs and the charts, assessing the validity of their data, performing root cause analysis, correlation and causation. But most importantly, and I didn't mean to read through all these, we want to use storytelling to help the consumers quickly understand and act. Getting into a lot of this other detail at the top, it is incredibly important, but using the storytelling, letting the data speak to people, that's going to be what makes those novice users go, oh, that's interesting. What else can it tell me? And that's what we want them to say. So a big part of that is removing the noise. And so Nate Silver, there's a quote here. This is actually from that book that I showed you at the beginning. There's a quote here from Nate Silver. He's a statistician from the United States here. He has a company called 538. And so you might be familiar with him and his blog. He's incredibly brilliant. I like his blog. He's not my favorite speaker in person to listen to. He's kind of dry, but he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. In 2012 in the United States, he correctly predicted the outcome of the presidential election for all 50 states. Now, in 2012, was before elections started being stolen or whatever. Okay, so it was before that. So I'm making fun of our country a little bit there. But that's quite a feat to be able to use data in order to be able to accurately do predictions there. But he said, the signal is the truth and the noise is what distracts us from the truth. So we want to remove the noise. And from the book, there is some lessons here on how we can remove noise. And it's removing surplus data, that extra data you don't need. On that visual I showed you, that Power BI page, the map was not something that was asked for. It's not something that needed to be seen. So that's something that I would consider surplus. I do see a question. Isn't the intent to provide information based on the means by which the audience consumes it? Yes, it is. But the audience, if the audience is not going to consume it, then nobody's going to be reading your reports, no matter how great they are. So there are a lot of people who are going to gravitate and look at your reports and go, wow, I am blown away by some of the reports I see by people all the time. And I would dig into all of them and just jump right in and do that. But the reality is, at a lot of customer locations, a lot of end user locations, you roll a report out to people and a lot of them are going to reject it. They're going to that's just human nature, that there's always going to be someone who is leading the pack and being a negative influence on there. And so at that point, what you want to do is you want to build some of your reports. That's where I had that theory that you have reports in different areas. You build a report for me. Yep, you're going to give me the information. Oh, yeah. So you're going to give me all the information you can. But there sometimes, for like the salespeople, for example, I see a lot of salespeople say, I'm not interested in that report. And even though they're saying that, it's a lot of their information. And so we want to be able to make it as easy for them as possible, because if they find it difficult to get the information out of it, even if it's for them, or the information looks complicated, they're not going to use it. And then so much for user adoption, so much for the power of your report. And so that's why this is so important. But yes, giving the right information to those users is important, but we're really talking about how you're going to give it to them. And okay, so continuing on with removing the noise, aggregating less important data. So you want to think about that as you do that. Not enough people use groups and binning inside of Power BI. If you're not familiar with that, I encourage you to check it out. Groups and binning can really help it out. And groups would be a way that you could take all of your, like all your customer data and inside of Power BI, kind of create your own categories of customers. Like I'm going to group these together and group these together and then dump everybody else into another category so I could look at it. And then separate any kind of data that's overlapping. Make sure that everything is very clearly defined and not one thing hindering the understanding of another piece. And we'll get into some more specifics on those in a moment. So let's focus first, though, on the removing the surplus data. So data and categories, this is an important thing to remember. Our data is going to grow and grow over time. The amount of data we have now is tremendous compared to what you had 2 years ago. And it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so getting it in visual format is the only way we're going to really be able to start consuming it when it's in masses. And so we need to look at that report we build and we're like, okay, what is our data story? And in this data story, if someone's wanting to know about inventory quantities and sales, then the data story is sales. So we need to focus on sales. So as we focus on our sales, we might want to think about, okay, the matrix we had sales by item. We had a line chart for sales. We had a total card sales, which I think is good. And then we had 3 slicers on it. So let's look at some of these particular. One of them was that line chart. Look how crazy this line chart is. It is so hard to understand. Of course, it is bad data, so not all of it filters across. And you'll notice that my legend here keeps coming over to the right. Meetup groups are the best way to travel the world. Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. Yep. But all of these lines, they could get very, very confusing, and then trying to figure out the colors and, oh, don't forget the colorblind people. Look how close those blues are. What about this blue and this blue? They're so close. I don't know. I honestly don't know who that blue is. So we want to make this a little bit easier. One of the things that we can do is aggregating some of the less important data. You may recall the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, where 80% of our business comes from 20% of our customers. And again, using the grouping and binning is a great way to handle this. And you could even use DAX. The SQL BI people have some DAX instructions for grouping and bidding. And now here I aggregated some of the less important data and I grouped them together. And you could see I made this significantly more easy to read. It's still a little tough, but I changed from looking at every customer to grouping customers in a customer class. And in this case, I did it by the data set, not by grouping and binning. But it does make this report a little bit easier to read because I don't have those 2 light blues, or actually 3 light blue colors at the same time. So it does make it a little easier. Again, as part of the aggregation, sometimes putting things in an area chart over a line chart makes it far easier to consume because you could see the coloring in the background. So play around with some of your different visualizations to look at them, and then look at the difference between what we gave initially with a line for each customer, and we didn't even have sales for every customer, versus the area chart where we can get a better feel. So we know instantly that this one and this one, which are the Canada here and the US here, and then what this blue one here, which is that's also US. Those are our better sales, at least in this month. And it's easier to monitor as we go through. All right. So these are some things that make it easier. Another thing we might want to do is just flat out take that line chart and put it in something that looks more like this, so that it's even easier to see, because we have, in this example of the lines, we have data falling all over itself. And maybe we want to take advantage of using some faceting or the small multiples if the chart gets too busy. So you might, even though I took the categories here and I did small multiples, that might even make it something easier to do. And then you could even make it a drill through so that you can get to more information. So keep that in mind. Now, if you do small multiples by period like this, you could even use spark lines on a rather than columns for periods. So you might want to keep that abreast of that as well. I love spark lines. If you want to have something by period, instead of actually putting the period out there, just put a spark line at the end of it so that you could see the small version of the graph or the small multiple on the matrix itself. I think that provides an easy to use and powerful situation. Now, focusing attention, Thomas Carlyle wrote, a person who is gifted sees the essential points and leaves the rest as surplus. And I want to point out that, look, this is proof, right? Sometimes you get to focus attention. You could use color. You might want to take away color. But I want to point this out. In the United States, there is a show. It's no longer has new recordings, but there's a show called Big Bang Theory. And in Big Bang Theory, there are a bunch of scientists. A couple of them are geniuses. They're all doctors. And in one of them, the main character, Sheldon Cooper, is parsing through millions of rows of data, and he finds an anomaly in seconds. And his friend Raj says, "How'd you do that?" And he goes, "It wasn't difficult. You know that when you see prime numbers, they appear red, but they're twin primes, they're pink, and they smell like gasoline." Well, we don't have the abilities that Sheldon has. So we can't look at masses amounts of data and see the things that make sense to us, see what we need to evaluate. So we require visualizations to help us focus on our attentions. And here we have we're using some of the matrix here to focus on our attention. One of the things we might want to take out items, for example, that have a 0 in the line so that it makes it a little bit easier to see. So just putting a filter out there will reduce the data that we have to scroll through when we're looking at it. Also, focusing attention, color. You have to be very careful about color. Color can be both signal and noise. In the example on the left where we're using the bar, I think, in my personal opinion, that is great signal. Now, they even have it where it's red if it's a negative, but that is easy. It's easy to consume. In my opinion, changing the fonts, I never find this to be easy to consume. I always have to stop and give it extra focus when I see someone using colors for fonts, particularly if they are red or yellow or orange or something like that. Even distinguishing between the two greens, I think the colors, it creates more noise for me than it gives me signals, where the bars, I can quickly look at the bars and I know instantly that I have signals. So you might want to think about that. And I do want to point out that these variations in colors of the yellow and the orange and so forth, these are very difficult for someone who is colorblind to see. So if you are interested in learning about color blindness, because 1 in 11 men in the world are colorblind, so it is something we have to focus on, no pun intended, when we are building out visualizations. It is incredibly important for us. And Megan Longoria has a lot of good information. I encourage you to look her up on accessibility for colors and so forth. But again, focusing attention, another great way to do it. Here are those spark lines of sales by period. So this is actually going through the period of the year. So I can tell, like, okay, why are these having just period here and there, where this one, whoever this is for or whatever it is, I can see that there's it's happening each month, but there's a steady decline. This one has a decline and so forth. Another great way is to use icons. These are things that can bring signals to us rather than noise. Now, for some people, this might feel busy to them. And so you'll need to vet out your users a little bit, but I love the icons personally. Okay, focusing attention, again, grouping items, preferably at the data source. This is where I grouped them using grouping in Power BI, as opposed to using the individual lines here. So I just put hardware by itself and software by itself. And then I group together basically everything else into this facts category. Preferably, you want to do it at the data set. We all are very familiar with Roche's maxim, Matthew Roche's statement that we are making him infamous for, but do as much of your modeling upstream as possible and downstream as necessary. But this report on the left is significantly easier to read than the one on the right. And you could always build a drill through to be able to connect to it. Not only is it easier to read because there's only 3 items, it's easier to read because as we get less and less item quantities, it gets more and more difficult to see the detail and to tell really what kind of value that is. And we might want to, if we open that up, then if they're all looking like these little lines, then they'll be much bigger when we're looking at them on this particular screen. So my takeaway here is give them tables with drill downs give them tables on drill downs only. I like to hide those table pages and then just focus the main tables on the aggregates. So you could still give them, thank you, Kristen, for putting in Matthew's Roche's maxim in the link, but don't give the tables right away. Show them that they're there and that they could drill down and get to them, but hide those tables and then give them the aggregates as well. I think if they do not have the tables to go to right from the start, then they're going to get more accustomed to using the other visualizations of data, which can give them a more visual story and give them, more insight into where to look for any kind of issues they have. Now, I like to personally focus some of my attention on my titles, and I like to do that with DAX. So you could see on the original report I had sales, and I also had a slicer for the date. Well, now I have a single title using this formula, and I can put using DAX, I could get the start date and end date for whatever visual or individual piece of data that I select, and I could see what it is I'm looking at. And it's actually an easier to use function than this one. Then I put the date inside of the filter pane. And then I find there's more functionality in the filter pane anyhow. You have that relative date that you could use, which is so powerful. You can actually set it more easy to a single date or whatever kind of range that you want. So I like to set the date, not using a slicer, but instead using the filter pane. And then I will put on the report itself in the title what date range is being evaluated. And you could even go through and put additional information. So on those items where I said I had hardware grouped and software grouped, in the case of software, if I was looking at sales for software, if I selected that group, now my sales title would say sales for software in that date range. And that's because I also added in another DAX filter here for that particular item. I'll show you how to add that in just a moment. Keep in mind, though, you got to have your data types right, because if you don't have them all correct, like let me go back for a moment. Let me come back right here. If I notice I'm putting this into a text format, it would have still made it work as a text format. But if I used text, sales for as my text, and then I did the date, and I'm making it act like text, even though technically it's a date, then that's going to kill my processor speed. So you want to be careful about that. Okay. And you might even want to go so far as to put in sales. So I have in my slide deck, I have the scripts that will enable you to do this. And so let's talk about, I'll show you how this is done. So let me go back to my Power BI report. And I've got a lot of my noise working its way through here. So let's come up to, I'll come to right here. And what I'm going to do I have my sales line right here. I also have, if I zoom in, and this is one of my favorite things to do, and I zoomed in a way I did not mean to. There we go. I have my date range and I have a sales title, but I have a date range measure right there. And here is the script that I showed you about, where I'm creating a text version of the first date in the field and the last date, and then I'm just basically concatenating them together. So what I'm going to do, let me come back over here and click on something else. Whoop, come back again. We'll click on something else. So we hide the formula. Okay. When I select on this text field, what happens? We all have seen that we get the, I'm going to just overwrite the sales a little bit. We all seen that we get this smart narrative option right here. Well, if I want to add the date range in it, I could even just come in and say 4, and then I'll do a return. And then now I'm going to come in and click on the value. And just like Q&A, I'm going to put in date range, which was the name of my measure. So oops, my apologies for not turning my phone off. There's my date range. I could see it is blue and underlined. It recognizes it. And it's going to be a dynamics field. So in the desktop, it'll be blue and underlined, but when you publish it, it'll be correct. There's what it's going to end up looking like. And that's what I want. Now, if I'm going to put more than one of these dynamic values in, you want to rename it. But if you're only going to have one, I wouldn't worry about it. But I'll go ahead and rename that. And note that if you're pulling in a dollar value or something, you can set how you want it to look. So I'll click on save. You'll notice that the font size is not really working super well. So I'm going to just change this to something a little smaller. There we go. Now we have our date range. And I'm going to unzoom. And this is a really, in my opinion, a powerful way to provide information to the end user. Whoops. Let me get rid of that. Let me get this one, and I'm going to move it down. Drag that over. Okay. So now if I come in here and click on a point in time, notice my date goes to April 1st to April 30th. So my date for my interactivity, my date will connect with whatever point I have selected. And you could do this for all kinds of things. This provides your users with a really simple way to see what's going on. And of course, you could always put in something in the filter. Then you don't have to put the whole date range like you have. If you want to be able to include your financial periods, for example, then you could come in, or even a year. I could come in and say, oh, I'm just interested in 2027. So I'm going to select 2027. Now you notice my year is set for 2027. Or if I had, and now I want March, now it's giving me March. So it's going to work any way that I wanted to work using that particular date range. Okay. So again, I try to put as many of the traditional slicer information in the filter pane as possible, and then try to make it so that the user can see easily what's going on by doing that. Slicers just add some extra space to it. Sometimes they're awesome, but I try to use other visuals to act like my slicers. So I'll try to give some additional information for that interactivity rather than have a whole bunch of slicers on the screen. And again, I prefer to put more of them on the filter pane. I think it's still easy to use. It still shows up in an app, even if you're working in Teams. So that's just a personal preference of mine, but give it a shot and see how it goes, because as long as that title up at the top is including everything that is being displayed on the screen, then, and you could do it with a variety, you could put concatenate the whole title and put it all in one big title if you want, then the user's still going to be able to understand what it is that they're looking at. YouTube, this is actually, let me get to this slide. And I'm getting close to my slide. This is from Adam Saxton, from The Guy in a Cube. And his topic, this is something from last September. Are you thinking about tooltips in Power BI? So it's a really great link that where you can take the tooltip and let it do more for you. I love this feature. I think we're not using tooltips for those new users anywhere near creative enough. A friend of mine, and Kristen, he actually creates small GIFs, puts them on a tooltip, and the GIF will actually is a quick video of how someone uses that particular visual. So it becomes a help icon as well. So some of your icons, you might want them to just be a tooltip, you want them to be something a little more specific, or you might want them to be a help, explaining what something is. So these are some powerful things as well. Now, I love cop shows, any kind of police show, or I love them. One of my favorite ones is Criminal Minds, and this is a character in Criminal Minds, Dr. Spencer Reed. And if I ask you if he has long hair and short hair, it's all going to depend upon your perspective, right? If you're Jason Momoa, Aquaman, then you're going to say, oh, Spencer Reed has short hair. If you are Justin Timberlake, then you're going to say he has long hair. So it's all about perspective. And so we need to, and relevance, really. So we need to pay attention to relevance. Now, one of the things that when someone said, oh, I'm interested in my inventory quantities on the report, even though they said inventory quantities, if you look at how many you have in inventory, what does that have to do with sales 3 months ago? So there's an exception to every rule. I don't think inventory quantities really is valuable to be on the same page as a long-time picture of sales. If that person that you're talking to, that sales manager, says they want inventory quantities, no need to put it on the sales report, because someone might think that there's some correlation between the two, that something with inventories might have something to do with sales, and they're going to be looking for any kind of interactivity or insights that's going to tell them that. And it really doesn't have anything to do with it. And they might end up making some false conclusions. Now, talking about the subject one time before, a friend of mine says, oh, I challenge you. And I love it when somebody challenges me. And what he challenged me with was, he goes, I could see you wanting to look at inventory inventory that you've sold, to compare it to inventories and quantity. And I'm like, or inventory that you sold to see what you need to have on hand. And I'm like, yeah, but that has more to do with inventory, not to do with sales. So you want to make sure that everything on the screen has direct correlation with each other, with all the other items, for new novice users. As they learn to analyze data, we do not want them thinking that there are correlations between what we have in inventory right now versus what we sold 3 months ago. So that's incredibly important. And we want to make everything approachable, make it clear and understanding. Now, keep in mind, there's an exception to every rule, but I say always use labels, and you can in your visuals, unless they make it hard to read. They add too much noise to it. So let's go back to this sales and gross margin by period graph, right? So we're looking at it by period. So here we have our sales in the bar and our gross margin in the line. If you add labels to that, the labels make it worse, in my opinion. So I would suggest not using labels, and make sure they understand by hovering over it, they get the tooltip so they could see the label. And actually, a more accurate number than rounding to the millions. If you're not someone, if your sales only go, you don't have anything that goes up to 0.2 million, then you don't want to round to the millions on your sales, because then you're going to have sales that have 0 millions and 0.01 million. So you don't want to have that at all. So I always say use labels, because it makes it understandable for users, unless it's just way too much noise, then get rid of it. So again, that's just my take. Another use of labels here as we're looking. So we have, let's see. So I changed the slicer funnel and added gross margin to it. And there's going to be, so some customers have no customer class assigned, which is why they're are grouping. So that's why they show up as blank. And that might confuse some people, as opposed to we show our model where there's no, that we don't show anything with no blanks in it. So if we don't want to include those customers, great, fine. We want to make sure that we get everything categorized as best we can. We might want to label them as undefined instead of as blank, because that might be an indication to some users, hey, there's a problem with the data because we have blanks. Why are there blanks? When the reality is it just is a field that's never got populated for that particular customer. So we want to make sure we have it working that particular way. Those aren't necessarily the exact same data. I'm not sure exactly why. I think I said it. I made some that were undefined and I said exclude the blanks. So yeah. Reference lines. Now, the one at the top that you can see, it's a real, if I zoom in, you could probably see it a little better. There's a small dotted line there that's light gray. That is out of the box. This is one case where I like to add a darker color to the background for that grid. I think it makes it much more user definable and definitely easy to see when when sales are approaching that line. That is just my personal preference. So you're going to, of course, find your own. And you can see I changed it from dotted to dashed and used a little bit darker color there. And then one other thing, if someone's going to use a mobile phone app, go ahead and build visuals that are meant to be used on a mobile phone app. We want to make it approachable for whatever tool users work in. And maybe you have several pages that go back and forth between the two. But now take the time to get the phone app working. Here's a great example of the title where I have the dollar value and the date range built right in. And so that makes it easy really quickly for a user to see. A dollar value, a single dollar value like this in a card are incredibly valuable visuals, because a lot of times people want to just know the total. They take that big long Excel report and they go right to the bottom. Oh, wouldn't you use the darker lines to delineate the numbers? Yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. So yes. And for sure. Did I miss one? Easier to read then. Yes. Okay. Again, I talk about color blindness a lot all the time when I'm doing presentations. Oh, okay. Thank you, Mark. Then this is the colorblind simulator that I use. I always go in and look for colorblind simulator. And when I find the one with the crayons, I know I have the right one. You can take a screenshot of your report and then just upload it right here. And then after you upload it, you could choose all the different variations of color blindness to see if it works for you. So that's how I do it. Again, I said 1 in 11. I've actually found some numbers that say 1 in 8 men. So I typically go 11, but we'll go with 12. That's still a lot. 1 in 20 or 200 women. 3 million people worldwide, that's 4.5% of the populations. And if you think about whoever is looking at your report, unfortunately, there's still significantly more men in most of the workplaces than women. So count the men up and try to figure out how many of them are colorblind. I find most men do not tell, or they don't even know, right? So you want to be careful about that. I know in the world of technology, dark mode is a thing, and everybody tends to love dark mode. When it comes to your Power BI reports, it is human nature to read darker letters on a lighter background. That is the way we have typically have acted or learned, and the way we're more comfortable with, and the way we just naturally do it. I have a feeling technology people are of a different breed altogether for that, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not sure. But when it comes to your reports, use a darker font on a lighter background for a variety of reasons. But the biggest one being that it's just the way we typically like to read. I do like to use a darker color. I use light gray back here. If you do not use like a template to divide up your page, then I recommend that you just go into the back, and I talk about this a lot, and this is a go-to for Belinda, but let me come to I always have a blank page with my template on it. Notice it has title and the date already in it, but I go ahead and make it a light gray. And to do that, I just come into the paintbrush. I go to canvas background and I pick a color. I don't even care if you pick a really dark color. That's okay with me, because what's going to end up happening if you pick a dark color, let me come in here and do it. It makes the visuals pop out a little better, makes it easier for people to read. So this is why I like using the darker colors in the background, even if it's light gray. It separates the visuals so that the eye can focus on one at a time, and then it's easier to read. It's just the way human beings tend to work. Making your colors approachable, one of the things you want to do. We are often, when we look at these logos like Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and whatever this one is, I don't even know. Is that Snapchat? I'm not even sure. You can tell which ones I use. We're familiar with these. We know that the Twitter icon is blue. So why not make the color that represents Twitter? For example, if you're using graphics, blue, so that when we see it, we don't have to keep going back up to reference to say, which one is lavender again, which one? So try to make the colors consistent with what people are familiar with. So as part of making it approachable, I say keep it clean, aggregate your visuals, don't show tables, try to hide those, and then use drill throughs for your tables. My personal take is make it like the stereotype of a movie drug dealer. Give them a taste and they'll want to keep coming back for more. If you make it a little too complicated, then it gets to be tough. They just need to find one thing that makes them go, oh, that's interesting. And they'll keep coming back and they'll slowly keep working on it. You want to instill trust. You want to convey your story, but you also want to establish credibility as you're doing that. So I'm going to give you an example of this. So when you could see in 22, I did this. This is a screenshot I took from my phone on March 8th at 11:08 a.m. We were driving down the road, my husband and I. He said, "What are the COVID numbers in South Carolina right now?" And, this was when things were obviously wrapping up, right? And so I said, oh, I don't know. So I pulled up my phone and looked and I said, 91 new cases. He said, oh, is that for today or this week or this month? I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know if that's this year. So this makes me wonder, right? I could see what they're updated through, but I don't know what that means. And does this mean like all cases? I don't know. So you want to make sure that it's something that's visible. Now, when COVID first started, I would go to our local site, and not on my phone, but in the big one. And I would write down the numbers, and I created my own data set and I would look at them. And it didn't take me long before I realized that the historical numbers were changing. And this upset me a lot because I thought, are they trying to distort the numbers? What's going on with this? So what I ended up doing, thank you, Kristen, WhatsApp. What I ended up doing, was calling them. I called them a lot through this, and I'm sure I annoyed them. They probably thought, oh, that crazy woman's on the phone again. But they explained to me why the numbers were changing. It was if they tested someone here and that found out later they didn't live here, then they took them off. And if someone who lived here got tested at another state, they would add them in. And still, I understood that, but I'm sure I couldn't have been the only one to notice that. So you want to make sure if you have a situation like that, you want to be able to explain it, even if it's a little text note at the bottom. That's something that you want to do, because that destroyed my trust in any of their historical numbers. To me, only their numbers for the day being reported became valid because of that. And so that's something you want to keep in mind. So you also want to verify your data is correct. You want to handle your sorting. That's something I forget to do a lot. If it's date, sort it chronologically. If it's non-dates, then sort it by something else. That might even mean adding in your own sorting option. In the case of months, I always add in my calendar the month number as well, so I could sort my months chronologically instead of letting them default alphabetically. And I do the same thing with days of the week. And so I always add the weekday number and the weekday name so I can sort those as well. But you want to make sure you have those sorted in the same order. If you're looking at like quarter to date and multiple graphs, make sure they're all sorted by the months in that quarter or whatever, but consistently the same way in every visual on there. Some visuals for the report consumers are already, build some visuals so that the report consumers are already using, so they could see, oh, okay, my numbers are in here. This is right. This data is right. This table or this list matches my total. So good. Oh, look how it's breaking down. There's usually an aha moment to be found. So whatever they're doing manually, make sure you have it, and then it is matching. Round data as the users expect. I typically don't like to round anything down, but if they're used to rounding down into thousands, then round yours into thousands as well. It'll get them a bit more comfortable. Definitely use promoted and certified data sets. You might even want to let some of them help you, especially if it's an Excel guru, let them help check the data. And then when you send it around, say, this data has been promoted or verified and is verified by Kristen Engel, and it's now promoted in our system, so that they're seeing some of their peers being responsible and being involved in it. That kind of peer pressure can actually help out a lot as well. So you want to make sure you're reporting the same data, right? You want to make sure it's cleaner and it's working right and it's exactly correct. I tell the story a lot. This happened in 95. I know because Windows 95 had just come out. We were implementing a system. I was building a report with both tables and visuals on it using Crystal Report Writer, if some of you are familiar with that. And I was implementing an accounting system in a company that had an old mainframe for 20 years, and I couldn't make the reports match. And they told me they wouldn't go live in the new system until they matched up. And finally, after a couple months, I'm embarrassed to say it took me that long, I sat down with a calculator in the old report, and the old report was wrong all along. So make everything about your report easier. Make it, have just the information that's going to be beneficial to them. Separate out some of the newer stuff. Maybe take some of their old stuff and your newer stuff on the same page and create more pages. But don't just put something out there because a map is cool, so I'm going to put a map out there. And they ask for quantities, but quantities don't really work here, so put quantities someplace else. Make it a little bit easier for them so that the story can be told correctly. A couple other things you could do before I get to some of my resources that I'll copy in. We're right at the end of this session there. And I've rambled on for an hour like I always can, but we have time for Q&A at the end, I think. Have office hours with people. And with the office hours, always have fake questions in the queue so that if people show up and they don't have anything to ask, you could always say, I had someone send me an email with this question, and you could go through it. That'll be a really big help with just the mentality of users. Try to get some of the users involved in helping you create some visuals or working in your data a little bit. And then, of course, make sure you have best practices in place and you review them regularly. And you might want to even extend the way some of your report works. I do have quite a bit of additional guides based off of everything that I mentioned, including like that 80-20 rule from SQL BI, Megan Longoria, all of these, and I will copy them into the chat in just a few moments. But now we can open up the floor to any more questions we have or comments or additional things that you do. I would be interested in hearing that improve the rate in which users are accessing data. Oh, I did not do that well. Hang on. Try it again, one at a time. Well, thank you, Mark. No other questions? No other comments? Or is it because I'm populating this all in, right? Not sure.
You explained very well, and nobody has no questions. So it means that everybody understood everything. Okay.
Well, we
really,
can't. One last thought: we cannot estimate the importance to which we are making our data easier for new users, because they will never become the seasoned users if you don't do that.
Yes.
It was, you have not how you use Power BI, but what you do with Power BI to encourage more end users. That's the question. I have a lot of these. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's it. I'll continue adding in my, I've got 2 or 3 pages done, just in case you don't want to get the slide deck, or you just want to have the link. Two more. And what the first one, I believe, actually had the book in it. Yes, I will make it available. Absolutely, for sure. Yep. And as long, you know, the Power BI piece, I'm going to actually send the whole Power PBIX file, because it's that way you can play with some of the DAX functions that I put in it. And just ignore the fact that on my Power BI report, I do have a few implicit measures. I was doing a presentation with the slide deck before, and Mr. Paul Turley himself was giving me grief because I don't even know which one I was using, because I had an implicit measure in there. So, great.
Thank you very much, Belinda.
Thanks.
Okay. So, if you don't mind, you can stop sharing your screen.
Yep. I am working on that now. Oh, there you go.
And the video permission, I would like to end stream on YouTube.
Yeah.
And also, I will stop recording.